So good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Grand Compagnie. Wonderful to see everybody here. How's everybody doing? Yeah, it's gonna be 50 degrees today and it's sunny. Amazing. So wonderful to be here together. So as always, let's begin our class by setting our motivation. Start by reading the meditation, the before meditation in the booklet. So as we do this, you can think that we're in the presence of all the people who are close to us, all the sentient beings who we feel strong affinity to, bring them to mind, bring them here with us. Loved ones, friends. Likewise, invite into our circle neighbors, people who we don't have any strong attachment or aversion to, people we don't maybe know all that well, and not just people, it could be other types of sentient beings, the animal, the friendly neighborhood ghost. I'm just kidding. And then also, most importantly, bring to mind somebody who you feel some animosity toward, somebody who just kind of rubs you the wrong way. This could even be not somebody in particular, but somebody who you know is causing a disturbance somewhere out there in the world. Somebody who's causing harm. So bring all of those sentient beings to our circle here today, and then we'll offer this prayer. How wonderful it would be if all living beings were to abide in equanimity, free from attachment and hatred. May they abide in that way. I shall cause them to abide in that way. Please bless me to be able to do so. How wonderful it would be if all living beings had happiness and its causes. May they have those. I shall cause them to have those. Please bless me to be able to do so. How wonderful it would be if all living beings were free from suffering and its causes. May they be free. I shall cause them to be free. Please bless me to be able to do so. How wonderful it would be if all living beings were never parted from fortune and the supreme bliss of liberation. May they never be parted. I shall cause them never to be parted. Please bless me to be able to do so. So let's think of our motivation for coming together this morning, having just recited the prayer of the four immeasurables and having opened our hearts to all sentient beings around the world. And let's ask ourselves this question: what do I really want in my life? What do I really want in my life? What gives my life a sense of purpose? Having just read the prayer of the four immeasurables, Is that really what we have in mind in response to that question? Is that what gives our life meaning? Developing those qualities of mind. Immeasurable equanimity, loving kindness, compassion, and joy. Being able to perfect those qualities within our own mind stream. And in that way, being able to help each and every sentient being. Is that what would make my life meaningful? And if the answer is yes, then how do we go about cultivating those qualities? When we ourselves are often short on compassion for ourselves. When we are often our own worst enemy. Does it seem like a very far reach to be able to extend and develop these qualities for others? So maybe that's the starting point, is being able to cultivate loving kindness, compassion, and joy with respect to ourselves. And in that way, taking baby steps, being able to open our hearts a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more to all others. All of the other sentient beings, big and small, who we come into contact with in our daily lives. And so now we are so fortunate to have attained this precious human rebirth, to be born with sharp faculties of mind, bodies with 10 fingers and 10 toes. And yet, being aware of the impermanence and the fragility of our lives, reminding ourselves over and over again that what we have is so fragile and easily lost, then we should ask ourselves, how does an awareness of our own mortality and impermanence, how can we use that awareness as a way to moderate, temper our relationship with ourselves? If we know that we can die at any time, does that help us to become a little bit kinder to ourselves? To be a little less judgmental, less critical? Things that might otherwise seem so important now seem kind of trivial, knowing that death can come at any time. Again, there's no point in dwelling on the past, beating yourself up, being stuck in past regrets, situations that you can't change because they're long gone. Why live in the past and stuck in history when the present moment is here in all its shining glory? Likewise, why spend a lot of time fantasizing about the future? a future that may never come. So giving up craving and attachment, those habits of mind that keep us running on the treadmill after temporary pleasures. Again, knowing that death can come at any time, and all of those shiny things that we accumulate and work so hard to collect and safekeep and guard and ensure, all of those things we have to give up at the time of death. So renunciation, giving up the attachment to the pleasures of the senses, whether it's tasty food or beautiful clothes or a nice warm jacket. Beautiful artwork, the finest perfumes and colognes. All of those things are meaningless in the long run. And so the Buddha taught four very important principles. He shared these very important principles, sometimes known as the Four Seals, S-E-A-L-S. And so we have this tendency to mistake the impure as being pure, phenomena that are inherently impermanent, we think of mistakenly as permanent, such as ourselves. We tend to be tricked. We mistake suffering as being happiness. And finally, we think of the state of nirvana as a state of peace. So as a first step, practicing renunciation, not really the first step, but continually reminding ourselves over and over again that giving up attachment to the eight worldly dharmas, happiness, being praised instead of criticized, wealth over poverty, etc. By giving those all up, then that allows us to have time and attention and space in both our minds and our hearts to make room for others, because we spend so much time and effort chasing after the eight worldly dharmas and being preoccupied with them, then that leaves very, very little room. In fact, it does the opposite. It closes us, shuts us away from, closes the door to others. Because what is mine is not what is yours. So automatically, things are segregated, and we discriminate mine from yours. We build walls to protect what's mine, to keep what's yours from coming into our domain. So in order to develop a deep understanding of ourselves, of our own true nature, in order to be able to break free from these mistaken thoughts, what gives us the motivation to investigate, to explore the way in which we live, the way in which we see ourselves as living, as existing. And we need to really understand the topic of suffering. Suffering meaning that sense of dissatisfaction, the dissatisfied mind that is the state of mind that we have been mired in since beginningless time. And because we're in this state of great dissatisfaction or suffering, and that means that we're inherently, we're vulnerable, right? So we're vulnerable because of the fragility of our bodies. We're vulnerable because of the fragility of our egos. Right? So in all aspects, right? Both mental and physical, we're like an open sore, an open wound, so sensitive, so delicate, so easy to cause harm and distress. And so acknowledging that suffering is the first step to being able to treat ourselves with greater sensitivity, with greater compassion. And so I wanted to share two passages from the first is from Bodhisattva Bhumis by Arya Sangha, translated by Dr. Art Engel. Where Asanga describes 110 forms of suffering. So I'm not going to read all 110 forms of suffering, but I'll just share a couple of them. So there are different ways of describing the 110 forms, kind of different ways of categorizing them. Suffering has one form as relates to the suffering of a state of progression, that's the name. All sentient beings without exception are experiencing the suffering that occurs in a continuous manner. Suffering has two forms. Number one, the suffering that is rooted in desire is the suffering that arises when objects that are held dear undergo change and turn into something different. Okay, so that's impermanence. Secondly, the suffering that is caused by a ripening of ignorance is those painful physical sensations that cause the individual who experiences them to become bewildered in the sense of forming the mistaken notion of an I or a mine in relation to his or her individual existence, and then to undergo exceedingly great distress. So these two forms of suffering cause two types of painful feelings to be experienced, one physical and the other mental. Then the suffering of, let's see, I'm going to skip a couple. Suffering that has 7 forms. Birth is suffering, old age is suffering, sickness is suffering, death is suffering, meeting with disagreeable things is suffering, separation from agreeable things is suffering, and not acquiring what is desired and sought after is also suffering. Very, very interesting. It goes on. Then another way of then thinking about how compassion arises based on seeing that beings such as ourselves, all sentient beings, are in this state of suffering, then very naturally, confronted with that type of careful analysis or recognition of the different aspects of suffering, then compassion that wish to be able to free beings from suffering arises. So the stronger our familiarity and our acceptance and meditation on suffering, then the stronger the power of our compassion will be. So this is from Vasubandhu's Summary of the Five Heaps, again by Art Engel, as the translator and commentator. So he wrote, so Chandrakirti, one of the great Indian masters, compares samsaric beings, such as ourselves, who wrongly believe in the existence of a true self, a real self, to the buckets of a wheel device that is used to raise water from a well, to irrigate a field, and praises the compassion the bodhisattvas cultivate towards such helpless beings. A bodhisattva is somebody who has committed him or herself totally to freeing sentient beings from the state of samsara, from the state of suffering. So this verse is identified as representing the type of compassion that apprehends sentient beings in a common sense manner. I bow to the compassion that is felt toward beings who, after first being attached to the self as an I, capital I, generate desire for entities that they regard as mine, and who are as powerful as a revolving water wheel. So how does this, what does this mean? So Chandrakirti describes 6 ways in which the samsaric existence of beings resembles different parts of the machine. So like the clay buckets that are fastened to the wheel, samsaric beings are tightly bound by ropes of karma and the mental afflictions. So does everybody have a sense of what this like a water wheel that goes around and it's got little buckets and it dips in the well, right? It goes around and around and around. Like the oxen or other animals that drive the wheel with its buckets, samsaric beings are propelled by the motivating force of their own undisciplined minds. 3, like the buckets, beings revolve continuously in the deep well of samsara that reaches from the peak of existence down to the lowest hell. 4, like the rising and falling buckets, beings descend to the lower realms of samsara effortlessly due to their bad deeds, but are drawn up to higher levels only when the effort necessary to accomplish good deeds has been exerted. 5, just as the water wheel turns continuously without beginning, middle, or end, samsaric beings continuously manifest the 3 aspects of afflicted samsaric existence: the mental afflictions, karma, and birth. 6, just as each day some of the water wheel's clay buckets are damaged or broken, beings are continually battered by the 3 forms of suffering. So Tsongkhapa, Tsongkhapa Rinpoche commented on how to develop compassion for ourselves. He says, regarding this analogy of the water wheel, you must first reflect on the manner in which you yourself wander in samsara in order to evoke a genuine awareness of your own samsaric suffering. Otherwise, without having previously developed such an awareness to any degree at all in relation to himself or herself, a beginning practitioner, that's us, who tries to contemplate this topic in relation to other sentient beings will not be able to develop the sense that their suffering is unbearable. So I hope that was helpful. think of. It's one of those analogies that you can go back to over and over again. So, Thupten Jinpa, in his chapter, we're looking at chapter 7 now, is focusing on the way in which we can cultivate self-compassion. Title of the chapter is May I Be Happy, Caring for Ourselves. The first sentence is, often we are our own difficult person. And he, on page 135, dives in and talks about some of the different techniques that we can use to be able to cultivate self-compassion. So the first one is cultivating compassion for ourselves by wait, hang on. Being with our own suffering without resistance, and without giving into the urge to find an immediate solution to the problem. So being able to sit and to accept our own suffering without resistance and without giving into the urge to find an immediate solution. That was the first point. And so the training that's part of his compassion cultivation training, or CCT, involves training ourselves to be able to simply sit and observe our own experience, and staying with whatever emotions or thoughts, whatever arises, being able to stay with it. So rather than our natural tendency, if a painful memory arises, is to turn away, to run away, to deny that the emotion has arisen, to try to suppress it, right? Or to, often we end up, angry or irritable or frustrated, disappointed in ourselves, to get mad at ourselves for not having moved on, perhaps. And then the second technique that he describes briefly is being able to distinguish between the language of observation and that of evaluation or judgment in our thoughts. So observation statements relate to facts, while evaluative statements pertain to our interpretation of these facts. This is on page 137. And he gives the example of going through an airport security check. He says, so let's say you're at the airport and the line that you happen to choose suddenly becomes slower and you start to get impatient. And because of that, you start to beat yourself up. You start thinking, oh no, I always pick the wrong line. I always pick the slowest line. I'm such an idiot. Why do I keep doing this? Nothing ever goes right for me. So, but if you examine those thoughts carefully, you realize that none of those really reflect what's going on at the airport, right? They're just emotionally charged prejudices, they're assumptions, just generalizations, right? The actual situation is just that there was a slowdown at the security checkpoint, right? That has nothing to do with whether or not you picked the slowest line or something. This is just, so I think I tried to give an example in one of the previous classes about being very careful on how we think of an experience. And so the example I gave was a dog ate a jacket. And think of the difference in emotion that is associated with that sentence versus, okay, a dog ate my jacket, right? It's bringing it a little closer to home. A dog ate my favorite jacket, right? Or my dog ate my favorite jacket. right? My stupid dog ate my favorite jacket, right? Like it just goes on and on, right? So your mind has our minds have a tendency to editorialize, right? To package, to add those adjectives and those adverbs until the situation is completely, blown up and dramatic, right? It's tasty. It's something that you can share with others. It's something that you can get upset about, something that your emotions can get engaged in. And before you know it, you've got something to post on Facebook. So he writes, we need to challenge our evaluative thinking and other habitual thought patterns, especially our sense concepts. Despite all the evidence to the contrary from psychology, neuroscience, and our personal experience, most of us continue to hold on to a static self-representation. So this is really important. Each of us has internalized from our cultural, social, and childhood experience a particular representation of ourselves, a self-concept that exerts a powerful influence on our everyday life because it affects how we perceive as well as experience both ourselves and the world around us. There's nothing wrong with having a self-concept. I think self-concept could be, anything from our identity, our psyche, our ego, like this is just the term that he used. The problem is that most of us fail to appreciate that it is just that. It's a concept, a construct of our mind developed through our experience. We believe in the story that we ourselves have made up. And here's the punchline, we confuse the content of our thoughts with reality. When we catch ourselves indulging in habitual negative self-judgments, I'm no good, nobody loves me, I don't deserve to be happy, and so on, right there, we need to bring in the questioning voice that says, hey, wait a minute, these are just my thoughts, they're not me. Okay. So that brings up this whole question, and he doesn't go into this in great depth, but it's worth touching on just because it's a very important part of understanding ourselves. So this idea of who are we? And when we ask ourselves the question about our motivation in the beginning, what do I really want from my life? What gives my life purpose? Then I think that underlies this search for identity, who we really are. And so I wanted to share just two quotes, two different perspectives to take this one step, further. The first is from Zigar Tendrol, from that same book that I referenced the other day. It's Up to You, the Practice of Self-Reflection on the Buddhist Path. And he makes the analogy of the mind being kind of like a ghost. He says the subtitle of this chapter, which is called Looking in the Mirror. This is on page 5. The spookiness of ego mind. Holding to an ordinary notion of self or ego is the source of all our pain and confusion. The irony is that when we look for this self that we're cherishing and protecting, we can't even find it. The self is shifty and ungraspable. When we say, I'm old, we're referring to our body as self. When we say my body, the self becomes the owner of the body. When we say I'm tired, the self is equated with physical or emotional feelings. The self is our perceptions when we say I see. And it's our thoughts when we say I think. When we can't find a self within or outside of these parts, we may then conclude that the self is that which is aware of all these things. So it's like the knower or the mind, some kind of controller, separate from the body, from the mind. But when we look for the mind, we can't find any shape or color or form. The mind that we identify as the self, which we would call ego mind, controls everything we do. Yet it can't actually be found, which is somewhat spooky, as if a ghost were managing our home. The house seems to be empty, but all the housework has been done. The bed has been made, our shoes have been polished, the tea has been poured, and the breakfast has been cooked. So we just assume that someone or something is there, but all this time our life has been managed by a ghost, and it's time to put a stop to it. On one hand, ego mind has served us, but it hasn't served us well. It has lured us into the suffering of samsara and enslaved us. When ego mind says, get angry, we get angry. When it says, get attached, we act on our attachments. So when we look into the slavish arrangement we have with our ego mind, we can see how it pressures us, plays tricks on us, and causes us to do things that bring undesirable consequences. So then he goes on and on. But the most important point is, we can't just accept the existence of such a phantom mind, such a ghost mind, right? We'd have to actually stop and see. We'd have to be able to find this sense of self. And so when we do the meditation, any type of meditation, right? Whether it's meditation on the breath or meditation on the mind, watching the mind vast as the universe, the big mind meditation, then all of that, it can be used not simply as a mindfulness practice to develop concentration, but in order to understand how the mind exists, looking for that ghost mind. Where is that sense of self? Who are we really? And that's not necessarily some big metaphysical emptiness trip, right? It doesn't have to be like that. It's just who are we? We're all familiar with that chattering mind, the mind that calls us names, the mind that can be very judgmental, can be very harsh, or the opposite, can be a good friend. It has the potential to be loving and supportive and kind to us. But how does that work? How is that transformation possible? Where's the ghost? So likewise, another quote from Lama Yeshe. This is a collection of his teachings called Ego, Attachment, and Liberation. He wrote, he talks about your mental bureaucracy. Mental bureaucracy has two departments, ego and attachment. The two departments of ego and attachment work together in your mind, and as long as they do, whatever sense pleasure you enjoy, wherever you go, whatever friends you have, nothing lasts. Your ego makes a wrong projection on an object, and your attachment follows without hesitation and gets completely stuck on or tied to that object. And this splits and severely agitates your mind. So it's like your mind comes into contact through its sense faculty, a sense faculty. Let's say it sees, a tasty piece of chocolate cake, right? Maybe you can smell it, you can see it, and then your mind reaches out and mentally, right? You're grasping, or maybe even physically, you're grasping that piece of cake, right? And the concept, the expectation of how delicious it's going to taste, all of that like becomes merged with the chocolate cake so that it's indistinguishable from the cake that's there on the plate in front of you. So that all comes together, that this physical aspect and the mental aspect of grasping, of wanting to make that cake your own. And so you can't, divorce you can't separate that quality of, ooh, yummy, yummy, the yummy goodness, right, that you expect to indulge in and enjoy from the cake. You think that it's one and the same. And then one part of your mind, a more critical aspect of a mind would say, well, no, because, when you think about it, somebody else doesn't like chocolate. So for them, that attachment doesn't arise, right? They just don't like cake, period. Right? They don't like sweet foods. So for them, they don't have that problem. So that means that, the property of yumminess comes from your own mind, right? It's not inherent in the cake itself. If it were inherent in the cake itself, then everybody would want the chocolate cake. We'd all be fighting for it. Right? So that's great. So only I can eat the cake. I'll have the whole cake to myself. All right. So when two people get married and their ego's interpretation is that they should be together forever in life and even after death, it's so exaggerated. There's no way people can make that kind of decision. It's not up to them. It's up to karma. Uncontrollably, karmic energy decides which partner lives and which dies. And when one finally does, the other misses him or her badly and experiences tremendous suffering. So all that worry and weeping, missing and memory comes from the two mental departments of ego and attachment. Not understanding the impermanent nature of phenomena and expecting to live happily ever after as ego and attachment wish, that brings the reaction of misery. And that is a karmic result or effect. If you understand impermanence, one of those four seals that I mentioned, there's no upset, no misery, you just accept death as a natural thing. In fact, you expect it to happen, right? We were just talking about death and impermanence. With understanding and acceptance, there's no worry because you know separation is natural. All right. And so that puts a tremendous amount of responsibility and control on us, right? So the Lama Yeshe wrote, we have this tremendous opportunity to be able to find happiness, be able to understand the workings of karma, to be able to free ourselves from suffering. You don't have to change anything external. The only change you have to make is within your own mind. As soon as you change your projection, your hallucination, the way in which your mind interacts, editorializes, adds the adjectives and adverbs, right? Just like we were talking about before. Then the outside world changes too. It changes automatically because your basic view becomes positive. All right. So we're going to do rest of this classes, a series of meditations. And we're going to start with one of the inquiry exercises. So these inquiries are designed to give you a chance to really think carefully, think closely about the question, right? So for those of you who maybe haven't done it before, what we do is we break up into pairs, and each person has a chance. One person, let's say there's person A and person B. So person A asks the question to person B, right? And the point is that person B responds in just one or two words, right? So you give a quick response off the top of your head from your heart, right? Don't go on for paragraphs, right? You just say 1 or 2 words. It's not a conversation. There's no dialogue between person A and B, right? And we've done this before, and I heard a lot of conversations, okay? That's why I'm going over this again. This is much more powerful if you keep it as almost as a meditation, because you could do this by yourself, right? You could just keep asking yourself the question over and over again by yourself, but it's a little more, anyway. So person A just then repeats the question, right? So let's say the question was, what did we do last time? What are the benefits of meditation, right? Like, why do you meditate? So like, if Elizabeth were sitting there and I said, Elizabeth, why do you meditate? And she'd say, it feels great. Elizabeth, why do you meditate? Oh, it gives me insight into my, that's a long answer. Deepens my insight, okay? Elizabeth, why do you meditate? Right? And then she goes and says something else. So then after 2 minutes, we're going to switch. And then Elizabeth is going to ask me the question. Okay? So it's not like I don't keep going on. Oh, really, Elizabeth? Is that terrific? How long do you meditate? Oh, that's great. Oh, okay, keep it up. No, none of that. Right? And then afterwards, you'll have a few minutes to wrap it up, to talk and share. Okay? Very, very powerful exercise. We've been doing it the last couple of classes, and I think people have found some benefit to it. Mostly because I can never get everybody to stop. So that's a good sign, right? Everybody wants to do this. So we'll just do this for a few minutes, and then we're going to do a meditation on forgiveness, self-forgiveness, and then self-acceptance and loving kindness. So I will not be talking too much. I'll just be guiding. What are the questions again? Okay, so let's divide into groups of 2 first, and then I'll tell you what the question is. Right? So sit next to somebody. Figure this out. Somebody might have to move. Maybe sit next to somebody that you don't know, that you haven't done this with before, okay? Don't sit next to your loved one. Or you can, it's up to you. Is everybody? Yeah, you got it. Do we have an odd number? If we've got an odd number, then I can do it with somebody. What's the question again? Hang on one second. I think we have an odd number. Do we have an odd number? So, okay. Do you want me to? I can work with you if you don't have a partner. You want to do that? Does everybody have one? You're in a group of 3, right? You want to do it as 3? Just come sit here. Somebody come sit here. Then I'll have to answer my own question. Are you huh? I have no idea. Okay, the question is, now you've introduced yourself, right? Everybody knows? Okay. The question is, what is your essence? What is your essence? You can answer that any way you want. What is your essence? So figure out who goes first. Just 2 minutes. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. And then we'll switch. 2 minutes. Okay. What is your essence? This is split up to me. What is my essence? I don't know. What is my essence? It's what is your essence? I visualize my essence as white light inside. Okay. White light inside. Yeah, it's like if I really, I've thought about this. It's not a word. It's a light. Energy. What is your essence? It's a pure energy.
It's pure energy.
What is your essence?
It's my heart.
What is your essence?
It's not my heart. It's just, it's the heart feeling. It's a purity at one with the universe. It's so deep inside me. It just wants to connect with everything.
What is your essence?
I don't know.
Okay, I think that was two.
It's a really tough question. I'm trying to figure it out.
It's really tough.
I feel like it's like more like lightning, action word. I don't know.
Okay. Okay, that's 2 minutes, so we can switch now.
What is your essence?
I don't know what it is.
What is your essence?
Made out of water, space.
What is your essence?
It's coming together. Karma.
What is your essence?
An expression of karmic potential right now.
What is your essence?
I don't think there's anything there.
What is your essence?
I think it's just that openness, responding to karma right now.
What is your essence?
Essenceless.
What is your essence?
The lack of the findable essence.
What is your essence?
It's that space that has the potential to transform.
What is your essence?
Hopefully compassion one day. Compassion and wisdom.
What is your essence?
Open awareness.
What is your essence?
Inside the child, what is it? And under that,
It's confusion, samsara.
What is your essence?
The ability to change, the ability to transform.
see others.
No, I'm kidding. I think it's done.
We're empty of this. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's it. 2 minutes is up.
Okay. I know.
That was cool. Good. It's kind of empty. I just feel it.
Okay.
The answers came up.
Anything that anybody would like to share? I have a difficult question for a Sunday morning.
I heard someone says I'm peanut butter. I said, okay.
I like peanut butter.
Yeah.
I just feel like every time I was asked a question, question, a different answer would come up, and I realized it's really just empty of essence. You just
Okay.
kind of project different things.
Oh, okay. Okay. So just thoughts just were arising out of that emptiness? Projections.
Yeah.
Every time I say something, I know that under that word, there's so many more layers.
Yeah. There are so many different ways that you can think of essence. Uh-huh.
I thought that as you went on, you maybe get deeper and deeper, but I found the first thing that I said was, I really thought about was really the essence, and then after
Okay.
that, it was more emanations, but that first thing was probably the most true.
Oh, what was the first thing you said?
Light.
Light. Well, interesting. You did too. Okay. Beautiful. Anything else to share?
Well, I wondered for a good match. My first name is peanut butter.
Oh.
His first thing was love.
Oh.
I was just gonna say, I felt like I contradicted myself. Like I'd say one thing and then say actually, the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I went from compassion to like delusion and ignorance and sorrow.
Just a question. So what is real? How do we know what's real?
No, not the question isn't what's real. It's
I
what is
know
your
it's
essence?
not.
What is your essence?
How do we know our true essence? You have one word?
Did you find the essence? You have essence?
I don't know.
I
I mean-
think it's nice to, because I'm not exactly sure what essence is, and I think that's a nice, that's why this was the toughest question that we've done, but I also think it's it was the most, had the most impact for me.
Not something that maybe we can answer in short.
Is essence like your aura? What you give off, or what is it exactly?
I was thinking of it more as like, who am I?
Let's see.
More.
What other people see or what you radiate, is that your essence?
That could be part of it. Yeah. I mean, because if you think that your essence is, or that you hope to have perfected, like say, compassion and wisdom, then the aura that you emanate, not emanate is the wrong word, but that you share with others would be love and compassion. So your essence, like a bodhisattva is the embodiment. Buddhas and bodhisattvas are the embodiment of compassion and wisdom. And so when you're in the presence of the Buddhas and bodhisattvas, you feel they radiate love and compassion. So you could say that their essence, right? In that sense, they are the embodiment of those qualities.
What? So is your essence changeable or not? Is it fixed? Or is it not?
I think everything is impermanent. Unless you're a Buddha and Bodhisattva, then they're gonna. I think they've got. John.
Right over here, go ahead, because you're out of sight.
I can see Karen.
That, we were just meditating a little bit in the beginning, and then afterwards I was thinking, this was like stream of consciousness, a sense of who we were at the moment, and it was just like fluttering. And I didn't have the same, I didn't say the same thing again and again, so it wasn't what we call Shanae or focused meditation in a way. So the sense of ourselves is constantly changing.
Yeah.
Like every second, every minute.
Just like somebody was saying over here, right?
So we were like,
Contradictory.
for me it was like grand, big, and then it was just my feet.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's all in like 2 minutes.
Right.
That's how the mind is.
That's how the mind is, exactly. John?
Yeah, so I was just going to say that, I agree there are a lot of contradictory, kind of answers or responses, not answers. So maybe our essence is even the ability to ask that question and have it meaningful. And, I think one of the comforting things about, being confused in this world is kind of realizing that, we get to ask the questions, doesn't mean there's an answer, or that, it's just, that's what we do, right? So just because we ask the question, what is your essence, doesn't mean that there is something, substantial.
Fixed or
Well, that's
permanent.
Right.
Right. Okay. So with that in mind, that is the backdrop, the context. We're going to turn to a meditation on self-forgiveness, forgiveness of the self. And there is actually one in A Fearless Heart. And we could do that. Cultivating Self-Forgiveness on page 199. There's an exercise on page 141. But I think the one in Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer's book is a little bit more detailed. So I thought I would read that one. It's actually combined with a, the practice begins with forgiving others and then forgiving ourselves. So given the interest of saving time, we're just going to do the informal practice on forgiving ourselves. So forgiveness depends on being able to open to the hurt caused, whether to us or by us. We've talked about forgiveness before, but just a couple of reminders, right? It doesn't mean condoning bad behavior. In the case of a relationship with others, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to resume a relationship that causes harm. We need to protect ourselves before we can forgive. Although actually, in a way that applies to ourselves as well. All right. So let's just try this. I'm going to just dive into this. So take a few deep breaths. Center yourself. Feel safe. Balanced. Loved. Now think of a person who you have caused pain. Think of a specific event that occurred in the relationship that you regret or would like to forgive yourself for. Choose a relatively easy situation, not one that would cause you great discomfort. Consider how your actions impacted the other person, and allow yourself to feel the guilt and remorse that naturally arise when we cause someone pain. It can help to let yourself feel the body sensations associated with guilt, making space for the physical sensations in your body. If you feel you acted wrongly, recognize that it is part of being human to make mistakes. Guilt is part of the human experience. Offer your self-compassion for how you've suffered, perhaps by saying, "May I be kind to myself. May I accept myself as I am." If it feels like you need to stay here for a while, please do so. There's no need to go further. When you're ready, try to understand what led to your mistake. Take a moment to consider if any environmental factors were impacting you at that time. Were you under a lot of stress? Or were certain aspects of your personality triggered in an irrational way? Take a moment to look beyond yourself and your personal interpretation of the situation. Or maybe you didn't actually make a mistake and were just trying to live your life in the best way you knew how. Now see if you can offer forgiveness to yourself, saying the phrase, "May I begin to forgive myself for what I have done. wittingly or unwittingly, that caused this person pain. May I begin to forgive myself for what I have done, wittingly or unwittingly, that caused this person pain. If it feels right, resolve not to hurt anyone in this manner again, at least to the best of your ability. Bring your attention back to the breath. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Any comments about meditation? So the next meditation is called self-acceptance. So in this meditation, we cultivate an image to which we can attribute qualities such as love, compassion, wisdom, steadfastness, trustworthiness, and so on. So we're going to think of an image. It could be a wise person who you think embodies those qualities. It could be just the image of a light at your heart, a deep blue sky. It could be an animal that you feel close to. It could be a tree. It could be God. It could be Buddha. So once again, take 3 to 5 deep breaths, bringing each one all the way down to your belly, then gently releasing. So bring to mind an image of compassion that represents for you love, caring, wisdom, and strength. Take a little while to let this thought of your compassion image permeate your mind. Have some sense of the person's presence, the person being here with us right now. Now imagine that in the presence of this person, you feel completely yourself. Nothing more, nothing less. There's no need for you to try to be somebody other than yourself. There's no judgment, no critical voice. Instead, what you find is simply acceptance, warm and tender. Dwell on this feeling of receiving unconditional acceptance. What does it feel like? Do you feel the slowing of your heart? A release of tension somewhere in your body? Maybe a sense of letting go. Retain this compassion image as you breathe. And as you breathe in, visualize warm light rays emerging from your compassion image, the person who you've invoked, that touches all parts of your body. As these light rays touch you, imagine that they soothe you, ease your suffering, and give you strength and wisdom. What do I really want in this life? What do I really need in this life? And what is my essence? And bring the compassion image to your heart. Turn your awareness back to the breath. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Any comments? Anything you'd like to share about that?
Thank you, Ani.
Okay, if not, then we'll close with the prayer and the prayer booklet. In gladness and in safety, may all living beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living far, near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. May no one have anger or ill will, and let none wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart, may we cherish all living beings. May we radiate kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies, downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, free from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down. Free from drowsiness, we must sustain this recollection. May we and all others be able to live in pure conscience and moral conduct, train ourselves in the heroic mind of concerning others, and develop the accurate view of interdependency. And thus make anyone who sees, hears, remembers, touches, or talks to us be free from all sufferings and abide in peace and happiness forever. Until the end of all sorrows in the worlds, may the beneficial instructions never be blown away by the wind of superstitions. May all genuine spiritual guides live long, and may the entire world be filled with people who seek for truth and find aspiration in authentic teaching. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have the Tibetan New Year celebration tomorrow, 10 to 11:30 or so. So everyone's welcome to come. Tsering and Tendrol Rinpoche will be leading Lama Tropa. I think we'll probably be doing it in Tibetan, but we have the English translation right next to it, so it's okay. And they made 3 big trays of kapse, which I've been very good about not sampling. So it should be really a wonderful celebration, a good way to kick off the year of the iron metal mouse, right? Metal mouse sounds funny. Iron mouse. Anyway.
Explain the holiday.
Oh, so it's Tibetan New Year is like just welcoming in the New Year, just like we have, you know, New Year celebration too. But the idea is to think that you're cleaning away and putting aside all the leftovers from last year, right? Just some purification and putting aside business that was left undone and all that stuff. And starting the year with auspicious prayers is good. And so Lama Tripa is a prayer to honor and to bring, draw closer to our teachers, to the Lamas. It's a very beautiful prayer that we do on all occasions. All right. Thank you. Thank you again. Have a good day.
Tendrol, is it going to be recorded? I have to work tomorrow. Is it going to be recorded?
I can talk to Chappelle, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know if it's being streamed. I can't remember. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Do you come?
On Saturday, thank you so much for this wonderful.
Oh, thanks for coming.
Do you